Welcome to the video, everyone, and in this video I'm going to be talking about a subject which I've spoken about before, which was the legislation or the statutes of the realm from Henry VIII. Because I was talking about a group of people who arrived in the UK, and they are referred to as the little Egyptians in the statutes of the realm. And so I've spoken regularly about Somerset and Stuart, and Somerset versus Stuart was when a Jamaican was brought over to the UK forcibly as a slave. And the UK has had a consistent sort of history after the Roman Empire and with the paganism that happened. It turned to becoming a Christian country, and Christians do not believe in slavery, so they were adamant that slaves would not exist on the shores of Britain. And so I've talked about Somerset versus Stuart, where Somerset brought about his case, and it says by Lord Mansfield, and you've got to remember that the judiciary of that time would have been the House of Lords, and that would have been a Christian lordship, I guess you'd call it. I don't know how you'd really call it, but anyway. Lord Mansfield stated, "The state of slavery is such of a nature that it is incapable of being introduced on any reasons, moral or political, but only by positive law," and positive law is statute law legislation, "which preserves its force long after the reasons, occasions and time itself from whence it was created is erased from memory." So he's saying that it can be manipulated and it's really quite an evil state of affairs having legislation. "It is so odious," and he's referring to slavery, "but nothing can be suffered to support it but positive law." And I do believe that our Human Rights Act is enabling foreign slaves to come to our shores right now, to work as for slave labour. So I'm still trying to decide how I feel about the Human Rights Act being removed. I'll probably do a separate video on it. "Whatever inconveniences therefore may follow from the decision, I cannot say this case is allowed or approved by the law of England," which the law of England is case law, common law, "and therefore the black must be discharged, and so therefore sent home." And in my other video, because at the moment on my other channel, the Matrix Exodus, I'm talking about a case or cases which I'm bringing against the police for negligence, and it's near impossible to bring negligence claims against the police, and that's because they've got immunity, which stems from case law. It's common law which has brought about that immunity, and I'm going to be positioning and asserting against that it was foreseeable by the judiciary that the consequences of for the reasons why they had the immunity. They had the immunity because it was there to prevent defensive policing, and I'm going to be asserting that they've brought about defensive policing through the course of DEI training, which is diversity, equality and inclusion. But in my latest video on the Matrix Exodus, I did refer to Somerset versus Stuart because I was talking about how important case law is. And it occurred to me that this happened just before the Peel Principles were brought about, which is 1829, which means that the policing started round about that, which is basically what, 60 years, something like that. 40 years, yeah, maybe 40 years So there was this massive case about slavery in Britain, and then that all happened, and we had in this video that I did about Henry VIII, that the little Egyptians started coming over, and he's obviously written loads and loads of laws, but there is also this thing about rape, whereupon murders, felony, rape, all these rape laws started to emerge around about this time, which was around about 1530s, which is interesting because I suppose the reason why I'm talking about this so much is because it was when I spoke to the detective on my own case after I was raped by an illegal immigrant, he told me that a lot of the immigrants were coming through something called bogus colleges or bogus universities. And these are educational institutions that appear legitimate but are primarily established to facilitate immigration scams or to sell fake qualifications. And that's how he arrived here, the rapist. And, you know, another thing that I really don't trust about the alternative media is that they sort of primarily describe the dinghies as the issue that's bringing in all these massive amounts of illegal immigration, and that's so untrue. It's actually the university and an education system which is bringing and supplying all of these illegal immigrants. And it was explained to me by the detective on my case that what happens is that these illegals arrive in the UK, they are told to remove their paperwork. Not all of them do, but some of them do, and they're trapped here. But they are recommended to lose their paperwork, and then what they do is they go looking for work in factories and anywhere where they can go and work for as cheap slave labour. They are taken on as slave labour in Britain by these huge corporations, which probably, you know, are many corporations that we're aware of in our daily lives. And I don't know who, but there have been reports of clothing manufacturing companies involved in slave labour in the UK by some media outlets. I remember it being quite big news. So these illegals, they're coming over, they're being used as slave labour, which is why I suspect that a lot of the people are losing their jobs and stuff. But I was wondering about that kind of thing happening back then in the 1500s. So this was really interesting. I only came about this because I was talking about institutionalization with my business partner, and he was talking to me how everything's turning corrupt because we're in this sort of state of institutionalization, and the whole purpose of that is to cover up their corruption. And so Harrow School came up in the Wikipedia for institutionalization, and I wanted to look into it. Also Eton, but there wasn't anything on Eton which suggested that it was corrupting or could have been corrupted in such a way. I suppose what made me think there was possibly corruption with Harrow School was that in the 1500s, which was when we're seeing all these issues with illegals arriving, the little Egyptians, that was when Harrow School was set up. It was founded in 1572, but it must have been started, you know, there must have been some kind of well, not must have been. There's possibly the scenario that it started earlier, but not officially. And it was local landowner and farmer who started it. So a farmer. And you know, you think about America, what happened over there with slavery. It was farms, it was landowners who had the slaves, wasn't it? So what it was the school had was enrolling local children, it said. The intention was to enrol local boys for education, and then that stopped because it extended over to foreigners. And they claim that the foreigners were more, it might be in this version of it. Yeah. Eton. Public boarding schools such as Eton and Harrow were founded or greatly extended to meet the growing demand for the education of children of those in colonial services overseas. It basically seemed to be, when you look into it a little bit more deeper, and it does seem that it was focused on foreigners. That one says overseas. Then it states later on that it was for local people, well, people of different counties within the UK. So it does contradict itself quite a bit. And it made me just think about the 1500s with the little Egyptians. It also made me think about Somerset versus Stuart when we find out that Jamaican was coming over here and being forced slave labour. I mean, what was the name of the Harrow School person? Lyon. Founder John Lyon. So that wouldn't have been Stuart, but I just wondered if perhaps what was going on was this fake kind of bogus school which may have been set up back then to bring over slaves in the same way that bogus colleges are being set up today. And to me, it does seem as if we've got this kind of 300 or perhaps 300-year history which is on a cycle, because if you think about the graveyards, they have a 200-year they have legislation over them for 200 years. They cannot be removed for 200 years. They're protected. But then after that 200 years, I guess that the councils can just demolish them or something. I don't know. But there's that 200-year protected legislation over graveyards. And it just seems like every 300 years or so, we're seeing this sort of repeat pattern of these little Egyptians, or whatever you want to call them, coming over here, causing mayhem and mass rapes against native populations. And it just seems to keep on happening on a cycle. So really, I just wanted to sort of raise that, because there could be something in it, and there might not be as well. But obviously history does rhyme, so we will see that what happened after those will happen again. In 1275, there was legislation to remove and expel the little Egyptians, and it seems that in the 1500s or 1600s maybe that sort of thing happened. I don't know. Maybe with Stuart, Somerset versus Stuart, they started to see a whole load of people removed. So anyway, that was just a thought, but went across my mind, and I thought I'd raise it with you and see what you had to say. Is it possible that these public schools, which we see today, the boarding schools, were they at one point set up by landowners and farmers to import slave labour? And then, because they started making money and maybe had to cover up their tracks, they did actually create proper schools, boarding schools. I don't know. That's quite a conspiracy if it did happen like that, but you never know. You never know. Several members of various royal families, 3 Nobel Prize winners. So it could have been aristocracy rather than slave labour. Or it could have been both. It was set up to bring about places for those in poverty. So you never know. You never know. It could just be that what we're told is the truth, complete and utter truth. I'm not a believer of that, but anyway, there's potential in what I've said. We'll have to see. Well, I'll leave it at that then, I think. But yeah, did they have bogus universities in the past to bring about slave labour, just as they have got today? And how do they? I suppose the way that it gets that it's gotten rid of is when sort of Christianity rises and people start saying no, we want, good ethical good recanter to all these immigrants coming over. We want a rise back in Christianity because we don't want all the slavery and everything. Will that happen? I don't know. I think it could happen, because if there is another war, which I believe there will be, then I think that a lot of the Christian people will say no, we're not going to war because we don't believe in killing other people and all that kind of stuff. So I think that they would probably stand against it, whereas those sorts of people who have already sort of shown their hand as being complacent with expectations of the mainstream media and politicians, I suspect that they will go to war and may be harmed, may not be, I don't know. But I suspect that that sort of stuff is going to happen. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things play out. Anyway, I'll leave it there, and please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe if you like the video, and leave a comment. Thanks. Bye. So I'm not sure if these were scare tactics to get people to feel fearful of, prescribing their own medicines, which would be called poisons, like we did see with COVID, or whether there was a genuine poison of 2 people and that is the consequence. But you'll see later that doesn't add up. There's this one, the act concerning Egyptians. This is really interesting because I didn't realise that was happening. So these Egyptians were arriving in England in 1530. Now, according to the narrative, they were from Little Egypt, which was basically where the Romany gypsies were coming into the UK, because they were leaving the Byzantine Empire and heading over here, and there was more and more of them arriving here. Frauds of certain outlandish people called Egyptians. Such Egyptians shall be punished by retracement of the loss of goods. I can't read that word. Derived of the benefit of statute. Do medicate. Ling something. Proclamation for departure of all such Egyptians. Goods shall be restored to the parties robbed. So this was going on. All of these people were arriving, and this is just before laws came back where later on they were trying to allow the Jews to be resettled in the UK. So this is where all those Jewish people were returning to or coming to the UK, and I did this in my other video about the resettlement, the old laws, and they still exist, but they shouldn't be here and they have to go, kind of thing.